We're recording.
Cool. All right, welcome to Cortex call. We'll kind of follow the same procedure as last time. So he's going through everyone on who's been working on ceramic implementation and see what's going on. So Janko, you probably have the largest update. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, I don't know from where to begin. Except of constantly working on stabilization on JS Ceramic. We have we did have the working ceramic anchor service on our infra, but now it's more tested, and we have a bunch of work on the ceramic anchoring service, like bloom filters. We need to implement that. Then more logic on ceramic anchoring service related to the updates that are being sent for anchoring. Just trying to, like, from both ends, just trying to catch every edge case. For example, like multiple updates before the anchoring event, actually, I don't know. There are a bunch of things going on, so maybe something specific. So something in mind. Yeah, actually, we also worked on decreasing the footprint of our dependencies, like in ceramic common, because it's used like more or less everywhere. And yeah, sorry for jumping around, doing some things in parallel.
Yeah, no worries. Actually, the thing I pinged you about before with how we kind of deal with multiple updates to the same document in the anchor service, I guess we can touch on that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So one possible way to deal with that is, so the first time you make an update, you just create the update record, and that's sent to the anchor service, and the anchor service can see, like, okay, this record is signed by this DID, because you can see like which it's signed by. You don't know if that's the owner of the document necessarily, but I don't think that matters. So you can just check, sorry. You can just check who the owner is, and then if there is a later request by the same owner that makes a request, or actually no. So we need to also include so it's okay. So let's back up. So the first time you just create a record and then you send it to the anchor service. The second time you have to, and you see that, okay, this is already a record. What do we do? Like, do we put it on top? I don't think we should. Instead, we should just create a record as in parallel, and we should add like a nonce to like the metadata or like the header of that record. Just it says like 1, and then you send that record to the anchor service, and then the anchor service sees, like, for this document there has been 1 signature from this DID, and this is the later nonce for that record, so therefore we use that one.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, if they're using the same the same ceramic anchor service, right? Like the last test I implemented, they just tested a bit, added the delay there, and I created a doc type and have like multiple consecutive updates, with every update just, requesting an anchor. And the result was just like 3 or 4 DocID records with 1 anchor record. So yeah, I just need to see like what happened to other anchor records.
Yeah.
Yeah, the current behavior, it's really the old behavior of the Ceramic anchor service, like 6 months old or something. It just yeah, we're just looking at the newest update and discarding the old ones. So that's kind of not that deterministic. So
well, I guess it's like, you know what's going to happen, but someone else could just like replace your update and basically screw your document update.
yeah.
So with the suggestion, the only thing that's like a little bit nuanced with the suggestion I suggested is that the anchor service don't know who's the owner of the document. So if you create a document and then you send an update to that document, to the anchor service, and then I also make an update to that document, even though I'm not allowed to, but I create that anchor record, or I create that signed update record. The anchor service doesn't know that, so it should probably like anchor both of them, and then it's up to kind of the so the anchor service needs to keep track of like, for this document, there's been updates from these 2 DIDs, and they are not like, they're separate. So we need to anchor them separately.
Yeah, it's, I'm just thinking out loud. So the thing is like, and then I'll so just like the quick brainstorm. So for example, I have a Ceramic A, you have Ceramic B, right? And we have the same instance of document, right? And if I create an update and you create an update, I publish my update and you publish yours, but we're using the same Ceramic anchor service, then I'm just gonna poll for my anchor record and then publish it again, and you will publish yours, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the document update that I make to your document will obviously not be valid because it's not signed by your DID. So it's just like but since the anchor service can't know that, it kind of just has to anchor both. But that doesn't really matter. But I guess what you're saying is more kind of the query. Like, I guess you would just get both back. Like if you query for this DocID, you just get both of them back.
Actually, no, I'm just gonna have mine back, right? But yours will be included in the same Merkle tree, right?
Right, but how do you know which one is yours?
I'm polling the request by request ID.
Right? Okay. So by the CID.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then that's perfect, because that should be simple. The only thing is that requires like a small update and tile, I guess.
Yeah. I think so. Because it's kind of like it's hard to since like it's decentralized, we cannot rely on just asking one node, right? Because maybe network latency or something, so makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, and this is even like a mechanism if it hasn't been anchored yet and I get like 2 different updates, I wouldn't know which one to use, but now I would know. I always use the one with like the.
Yeah. I think more about it, but makes sense.
Okay. All right. So that seems like a reasonable approach.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. How about about SAC, do you want to give an update on all DocID stuff?
Yep. So yeah, for like general context, we're updating document IDs from, which is just the CIDs, sometimes prefixed like protocol like Ceramic, to now we have a DocID multi-codec, and then encode other information along with that. So there's the CID, as well as that codec, and the doc type included in the DocID. Now there's also a library to build those, use those, create those, normalize those, show those around and stuff. Some of them also include the version encoded. So yeah, right now we're in the process of updating all the libraries to now use this DocID library and use these new DocIDs. Yeah.
Cool. And I guess how does the versioning stuff work? Like, as you're implementing that, because I know, like, is that pretty straightforward now that we include the version in the DocID, or have you run into like any issues with that?
I mean, practically it makes the most sense. It seems a little weird to have the version as part of the DocID, but practically don't see any problem with it yet. Like we talked before, it's like, what does like a DocID with a version, like, how's the quality represented? Like, do you have the same base DocID? Those kind of questions and stuff. Yeah, it's not a problem. I think we have to we do reference a version, of course, in a lot of places as links like inside Ceramic docs. So of course it makes a lot of sense to carry that context and encode it as that instead of encoding it as like URL params or any other encoding. So yeah, including it in the DocID seems to have made sense.
Yeah, and as for the equality discussion, for example, like when you have a schema defined in your document, that should always be defined with a version. So because like if you load a document in your app, you want to know that okay, if it's this version, I can support it. If it's this other version, then I might have like a conversion thing that I can use. I think there's a project from Ink and Switch called Cambria, and they call it lenses basically to convert between different schemas. So that could be a cool thing to explore in the future. Like, okay, so this is like the old version. I need to convert it to the new version. And there could be lenses from like newer versions to older versions.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, I think equality should include the version, but then I think, Paul, you mentioned that we can have like a flag that says like loose equality or something that just checks the kind of base DocID.
Yeah, I was mostly wondering about how we can, because we compare for equality between different DocIDs, and is it like, are we comparing on the base ID or on the exact versions or this kind of thing? And depending on the situations, we might want one or the other. But yeah, I think as Zach described on using the base ID, that covers the use case, right? And it's probably something we can check as well. Like if a DocID has a version, it means it doesn't equal its own base ID or this kind of thing. So I think it's like DocID class exposes all the things for apps and libraries to handle this kind of logic. But it's more like we'll see with usage, I guess.
Yeah, like practically we resolved it. Like now, yeah, it just has like a base ID, which returns another DocID instance, and you can just compare those. Yeah, I was just more wondering about the notion in general, but like I said, I think we decided that yeah, you definitely don't want one version to not equal another. So
wait,
that makes sense.
What do you mean?
If you have two different versions, two different versions, they're not equal.
Yeah, exactly.
Like schemas.
I thought you said that. I thought you said the other thing, and I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. So a DocID with a version represents some specific data, right? And the base DocID should always represent the latest state. So it's kind of like you kind of get this content addressing kind of paradigm anyway. Actually, one thing that I wanted to touch that I just came into my mind right now. So we're using doc version 0 in some places. I don't know if you've seen that, Zach.
Yeah, is that the, hopefully that's the Genesis
Yeah.
DocID? Okay.
How do you represent that?
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, in the test, I knew it represented the Genesis, but for some reason I just passed it as the DocID as the base. So I guess that wouldn't make sense in a lot of context.
Yeah, because we definitely want a way to load just the Genesis state.
Yeah.
But maybe we can use encode that as the 0 byte.
Yeah, as like a suffix still, like attached to the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Or some other, yeah.
Use 1 byte at the end that's like a 0.
Yeah, maybe. I'll think about that. Actually, to remind me that might be actually why it's not passing all the tests yet. But yeah, we'll add that in some form.
Actually, I mean, I only added support for v0 to use v version equals 0 like last week, as I was finishing up the ID wallet key rotation.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's affected or not, but I definitely saw it plenty of times. So.
Yeah. So, but I think it should work to just put a 1 byte that's a 0 at the end.
Yeah.
Maybe we should think about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So basically, is it ambiguous if we put just a 0? Because that 0 is technically the identity multi-hash.
I guess the problem too is if it's padded.
What do you mean?
If it's padded with zeros on the end.
I'm not sure I follow. Why would it be padded?
I don't know if there's just empty bytes at the end. I was saying, I don't know if you'd want a 0 at the end. Well, I guess it'd be like you probably encode it as a var int or something instead. But I'm saying if it was just like a 0 byte at the end, that could be ambiguous for just if there's extra bytes on the end.
Yeah, I would just see it as a var int, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just a 0 byte.
Yeah. Or it'd be 0, it might be 0, 1. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it makes sense to put some encoding other than the actual CID of the Genesis record, because that's quite a bit of overhead to add. Yeah, the entire CID when you could just put it in a byte. So.
Then you have the
yeah.
Okay, but yeah, good thing I caught that now, because yeah, you don't want to break that.
Yeah. And the last thing is assuming that we decided to remove subnets for now. So.
Yeah. All right, cool. Paul, do you have any update on any ceramic stuff?
No, not much since last week. Just this week having the release of IDX Web. So that uses IDX, but only in the browser and leverages TrueID Connect to authenticate the user. So yeah, so there's the first read on it of it and documentation on the idx.xyz website. But mostly it's really like the generic IDX library in terms of APIs.
Yeah.
Paul, is it easier now without the AJV dependency? It's kind of like huge, right?
Yeah, just from what I was seeing on TriID Connect, it was adding 20 kilobyte JSON. So it's good to, yeah, to not have it if we can avoid. But I think it will still have a lot of work with all the dependencies, mostly the all the bn.js and like all the crypto stuff. Really, that is taking a lot.
bn.js is like my mortal enemy. It's like the most wasteful library.
Yeah.
I heard that someone on the IPLD team was working on a new DAG CBOR implementation that didn't use the Bork library. So apparently that should be much smaller because Bork in ID wallet, Bork, and I guess JS did in other libraries as well. That's one of the biggest dependencies.
Cool. Yeah. One thing at a time.
Yeah. All right, Val, you've been working on the logging update for Ceramic?
Yeah, yeah, I guess not too much in terms of updates there specifically for logging. But like one thing that we have done is basically the Docker Compose setup to get the whole like metrics for your Ceramic node. We have that, but also now a way to get that deployed if you're using ECS. So there's like a simple way to do it, which I added some config for. So if people do want to have that, you know, hosted in the cloud, then they can do that, attach a volume to it, and pretty easily get started with just keeping track of the node activity. But the in progress stuff is the Terraform config to do that, which would be a more reliable system. And then kind of like next step for that is thinking about ways that we can make it a little bit more platform agnostic. So just started kind of thinking about that, like considering a few different options. Obviously, like there's no like one solution that's just like you can plug it into any provider, but trying to think of like small things that we can do to make that transition easier in the future. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for right now.
Cool. So basically, like, if someone is running a Ceramic node on their infrastructure, they can also like easily deploy
yeah,
the metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, basically all you have to do is spin up the Docker Compose stack. There's a CLI tool that AWS provides that lets you do that, and then attach a volume to it to store those files, to store your logs.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess one thing I'll do for that is like add documentation for it. I have the config, but I haven't added docs to make it clear yet. So, but yeah, that's there.
Cool. I guess I have an update to bring that I released a new version of ID Wallet that includes key rotation. And that had to wrangle some Ceramic code, partly what we discussed with like version 0, referencing to the Genesis record of a document. And also supporting that in the DID resolver so that you can kind of resolve a specific version of a DID. And also in the Ceramic volatile doc type, you kind of, instead of resolving the DID that's owner, you resolve the KID that's signed the JWS, and then you just compare that those are the same. Yeah, because then we kind of get the version information from the KID that's included in the JWS signature encoding. Yeah, that's nice. So ID Wall can now support like removing of keys that has been, or authentication methods that has been added. I guess the other discussion that might be good to have is around like that you and I, Paul, have been talking about a lot with the kind of encoding of doc IDs at the block level and how that translates up to kind of the, what should we call it? Like the instance level of a document, like the content level. So I guess there's like two parts to it. One is like, if we represent doc IDs, and I guess also CIDs as, well, doc IDs as buffers, or not buffers, but like byte strings. And when we put the record into the IPFS tag, we'll get some kind of benefits in terms of how many bytes are used. So that can be nice because that basically allows us to kind of, well, yeah, basically save space. And same thing with the CID. If we put like an instance of a CID into that will also be encoded into kind of the raw bytes. So that's like one aspect of it. Like we can probably do that fairly easily once we've done the JSON patch and we have the kind of JSON patch object, we just find all document IDs and replace them with like some representation that includes like the bytes uint data array. Yeah. And same thing with like CIDs. If there's a CID, we replace it. I mean, that's some overhead, but it might be worth it. I don't know if Janko or Zach, any thoughts on that? You're muted, Janko.
No, I'm just thinking. Can make sense. Didn't think about it that much. I don't know, Zach?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I thought before. It seems to make sense. We're basically saying like, yeah, we save a little bit of space, but the overhead is in validating, which is going to be like converting between the bytes and objects a bit more, right? And parsing back and forth to do like schema validation.
Yeah, I mean, the schema validation is not really kind of that part, because we're now at, there's like two levels to it. So like at this level, we need to, when we get it from the DAG, we'll get like CAD instances and uint data array instances for the DocIDs. And we need to convert those into something, I guess strings, before we apply the JSON patch. Because the JSON patch doesn't support object instances.
Yeah.
So that's like the first thing there. And so that doesn't include any validation, but it's just like, yeah, we need
I see what you're saying.
This conversation, conversion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I just maybe we can talk about it. Just thinking about like resilience on many levels of the ceramic node. So the thing is like, do we need to like start thinking about it? I think it's good time to just think about some resilience actually. For example, if I update a document, right, and I wanna, I create a signed record, I I just send the anchor request, right, and if my node dies, right, and I restart it, I should continue to poll, right, to see if my anchor is ready, right?
Right.
So
wait, so that seems like a separate issue. We can get to that later, I guess.
Oh, I thought that we. Oh, sorry. I actually thought that we concluded this one. Yeah, sorry. Just...
Okay, so that's like one part of it. The kind of how we store it in the block. The other part of it is how we represent it in the API. So one option that we're kind of doing now is that we only have the strings if you do like document.content, and you kind of just get the contents from the document as it is, like with strings, and CIDs they also have to be strings, I guess. And the question is like, do we want DocIDs to be represented as an instance? And I don't know if you had more thoughts there, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's useful to have DocIDs as an instance just on the library and application layer, but ideally it's like, I think it's more we should do this instantiation lazily rather than like just passing all the documents and doing all these conversions, even if like the apps or anything is not actually gonna consume or interact with them. But beyond that, I think it's, what I'm wondering is that if we should move forwards with just restricting ourselves to JSON, because it seems like all the things we are discussing now, right, is like, oh, we have binary data, but we are using JSON schema, and it's all the things like how do we convert what makes sense or anything. But going forwards with some of the use cases we've talked about, like if we have kind of scripts or worker types or this kind of thing, it's likely they will use a binary format rather than just like having the code as string and having to compile it every time, or this kind of things, right? Or I don't know, for things like more AI neural network or anything that needs to store lots of data, it might not be good for them to store document as JSON. So
yeah,
I think it's very convenient. It's great that JSON schema exists and we can leverage it, but is it not gonna restrict us a lot going forward?
Yeah, so I guess the tile doc type is what we're discussing now, and I think for script doc types and other types of documents, I assume they will be like separate doc types that kind of have different, well, they can choose to store stuff however they want.
Yeah,
so,
true.
Yeah, so that seems like a separate concern. And I think, to me, this discussion is about like how we handle it in tiles. And so what you're suggesting is like when you do like document.content, like that's when the conversion is done. That's when you like add the convert like DocID strings to instances or something like that.
Yeah, it could be, or even more lazily as it gets accessed. I don't know. I haven't thought about it so much in that aspect.
I don't know, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more expensive to keep it as strings, right?
Well,
in terms of the memory, sorry.
Yeah, just in terms of storage and memory, it's like if we can have it as binary, it's.
No, but I guess, yeah, for storage, for sure. Like if when we put it into the DAG, into the block, then yeah, it makes sense to store that as binary. So that's like the low level stuff. But I guess what I was asking about now is like how it's represented when you get the content of a document, right?
Yeah, and so that's what I'm wondering as well. Is like, as long as we have the content, whether it's a string or binary or anything, it's probably way lighter than converting everything to CIDs or DocIDs. Like just having all these extra objects that will be used or have to be tracked by the VM, even if we don't actually need them, right?
Okay. Yeah, so you're saying that basically in the representation we just keep them as strings?
Yeah, I think it depends on the use cases maybe, and so it might be safer to do the thing that is probably the most efficient, like not doing any conversion eagerly, and then doing it as needed in libraries or in applications. But
Yeah.
then if that becomes the case, like, oh yeah, we 90% of the time we actually want to cast all this to DocIDs, and let's do it. Just let's see until we have a strong need for this.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically, also we don't use the URI in the representation.
Yeah, I don't know, like whichever is, I think we don't need the URI, right? If with the DocID, we have the string representation and we can just cast from string using this representation, which is shorter than the URI. So it's probably best to use this. No?
Yeah, okay.
I think the main thing is really about how we can do static discovery over what is a CID and what is a DocID on the JSON schema. And so this way, hopefully we can have like smarter parsers for certain types of documents, because we can know like, oh yeah, there is this thing I'm interested in as it's defined by the schema, and just trying to extract this one and cast this one and everything. Mostly they're just trying to avoid having to go through all the objects and all the depths of the document to extract DocIDs and CIDs as needed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, ideally, I mean, in the best case, we could just like have things that works with these formats, but I guess that is hard. So it seems like what we want to do is in the representation, when you get it, we just have them as strings. But then in the block format, we might convert them just for efficiency.
Yeah, but even considering we're using JSON schemas, we might be more explicit and have them as like storing, let's say we store DocID as an object, and but to have the type DocID and value being the string, and this way we know exactly, oh, this is a DocID and not any other string. Right?
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I don't see an issue with that, because that's just like being explicit in the schema that like this is what you should expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then like the kind of signature or whatever you call it in JSON schema for CID and a DocID is basically the same. It's just a string, but
yeah,
but it's just like from looking at the schema that, oh, I will get a CID here or I will get a DocID here.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if we are reusing these types a lot across our schemas, if we can use like JSON schema fragments as well, but from other kind of like at least from my understanding with JSON schema, you can have definitions that you get over like external schemas or anything, right? So it's not like, oh, your schema needs to contain all the definitions. You can lazily load them and everything. And so maybe if we could do something like we have with IDX, with having hard-coded schemas and definition, we could have some partial JSON schema definition as well that would be hard-coded as as ceramic DocIDs, right? And we could kind of also limit the size of all the schemas we are defining by using these references for CIDs and DocIDs rather than just having to copy them over all the time.
Yeah, I mean, ideally what we could do is like create composable schemas where we're like, okay, I create this definition in a ceramic tile, and then you create a new schema that points to the previous schema.
Yeah.
But that seems like a whole new feature. I don't know if we want to do that right now, but it would be cool.
Yeah, the thing is, we have to be careful there with resolving the like subschemas, right? Those fragments. We have to be careful because of the like network, right? And loading of those fragments. So the thing is, we have to find a balance, right? If you need to chop the schema into multiple fragments, or what's the limit there?
Yeah. Yeah, I would probably want to punt on this until we kind of have more, like we've used the network more and we've kind of seen if there are like limitations, and then based on that we can like try to implement some of these things if there's a huge need for it. Because like if we have these kind of advanced queries where we can like, oh, I want all of this, then we could probably like load all the schemas that reference each other in parallel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. Ideally, this kind of fragments, schema fragments that would be heavily used by lots of other schemas would be heavily cached, right? It's the things you nodes should most likely have these documents already.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably something to aim for after we've kind of done the first iteration, feels like. All right, Janko, sorry for cutting you off.
No, sorry, I cut you off because yeah, I was just thinking like in parallel. No, the thing is, just think about the resilience of our node, and now we have like a couple of layers of storage and pinning of some documents, that we want to pin and store. But all other documents are more or less in memory. So if you don't want to pin them, or if you don't want to store them, they're cached in memory. And if our node goes down, then we can lose some data. Not lose some data, but actually the flow, right? Just to know where we, if we are polling an anchoring service to see if the result is there or something. So should we think about some like a thin layer, storage layer that actually stores like the minimum amount of data that can enable us to continue with the flow. So like not the state, but actually, yeah, I don't want to say the state because like state is, we just use it for something else, but the thing, where we at, right?
Yeah. So the way I've been thinking about that is if a document is not pinned and then node goes down, then that document disappears from that node. And further on that thing is like, if a document is not pinned, we should probably have some kind of garbage collection that is closes that document after some timeout. Because otherwise, like, for example, for the gateway, they'll just like open an infinite amount of documents.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. So there should be like a timeout for a document if it's not pinned.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, actually, I should write that down somewhere because we should probably want to do that before soon. Oh, this is the worst place to take notes.
Yeah, and the good news is that the DHT is working fine for JS IPFS. So like instances are finding each other. So that's cool.
That is cool. I actually couldn't get that working the other day when I was creating a demo for some reason. Or I don't know what was up, because I was able, if I used, so I created a document on the 380 Connect node that connects to our infrastructure. And then when I went to my CLI, I was like, oh, show the state of this document. And it got the Genesis record, but it didn't get any of the updates.
Yeah, it's heavy. It can be heavy in the beginning, like when you start a node. I just experimented a bit, turned on the debugging and like a bunch of messages, really a lot. So it slows it down, because I noticed that with the anchoring service, like I created an anchor, I updated the state, it's anchored, but there is no anchor record, right? So like it needs some time to sync, and it needs some time to find it, actually, the anchor record. But
but if I do like show or like state, shouldn't I get the latest update? Or is it just that the pub/sub is so slow?
No, the retrieve, actually, when we want to retrieve it. So
no, but I mean, if I get from the pub/sub, if I get the latest tip of the document, wouldn't the request wait? I guess it wouldn't. Okay, we probably need to think about that a bit more, because it's kind of weird that I make the CLI like, hey, what's the state of this? And I don't get the latest.
I have to double check that as well. Yesterday, I just played with it a bit, and I remember that earlier I actually got the state. It's like it's anchored, but I cannot see the CID in the log. And I was just inspecting it, and I think I waited a bit or something, and then when I did it, I saw it. But it's nice, because I believe I'm behind the net, so the one that we have on Infra has public IP, so kind of knew each other.
Yeah, so maybe it was just like slow when I tried to do that, but it's kind of weird. Okay.
Yeah, it's weird.
So, sorry, the other thing you mentioned was, when you request an anchor, if the node goes down. So like if I have a pinned document and then I request an anchor and the node goes down and I start the node again, I should still be able to like get that.
Yeah, and we need to implement.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's pinned and if it's pending or processing or just not completed or failed, we need to poll it.
You know what we can do? We can add a, I don't know if this makes sense. Maybe. Probably not. Never mind. With like a wacky solution, but it's probably not the right thing to do.
No, the thing is, that's but yeah, what you mentioned, like if we pin it, we have information about the record and like the document, but we don't have information about the request ID that we got from the Ceramic anchor service, right?
I thought the request ID was just the CID of the thing you requested.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Because I think that's what we ended up with, because there's no like it's deterministic.
Yeah. I think the first version.
Oh, so then we might not even need to store something. We can just like make a request to the anchor service, like, hey, is there a thing for?
Yep.
Cool. I'll make a note to implement that.
Yeah. Nice.
All right. Yeah, I think that's it. Anyone have any other updates or thoughts or something they want to discuss?
I have an update. The thing is, I'm still kind of like selfish and playing with the playground. Yeah, Yeah, it's not totally finished, but I believe it'll be next week. So yeah, playground, the sandboxed environment. It's really nice when all the components are there.
Yeah, playground will be nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm excited to try that too.
nice. Cool.
All right. Any other discussion topics? All right, then thanks all for joining, and see you another time.
Yeah.
Yeah.